Hello there and welcome back to the channel. It's been a really beautiful spring and we're now into the early days of summer here in East Devon in the UK. I've been working on a nature journaling project to document the 72 micro seasons of my home here in Devon. And as you may know, it's been going pretty slowly. I've been getting out just as often as normal to try and track some interesting things in nature that's happening every 5 to 6 days and making my list of things that I'm going to paint. But in terms of the paintings themselves, I'm operating about 3 months behind real time. In this video, I'm going to show you a few of the most recent pages that I've done back in the studio. But right now, we're going to go for a walk up this hill and we're going to go and look and see if we can find any interesting flowers up at the top. Let's get going. So I'm not really too worried about my kind of lack of progress with painting the pages for the nature journal. It kind of is standard for me to always be working several months behind, and I just have to make peace with that. As long as I'm actually getting out and getting the observations of what's happening right now, getting the photos, the sketches, the inspiration, it doesn't really matter if I'm a bit behind back in the studio. It's hard work getting up this hill, but it's kind of worth it for views like this. One of my favourite things about early summer is the smell of elderflowers, and as you walk up the path here, the smell of these just hits you. I really like the taste of them too. Isn't it magical up here? I've been up here a little while, kind of just documenting a few things that I've seen. I've seen a couple of small butterflies and day-flying moths, and I've been listening to the bird song. I've written out a list of everything that I've seen up here. I'm going to be using some of that in my nature journal to create a page about this, but I don't suppose I'll get to it until September. Still, I think this moment is really just about soaking up the here and now, getting as many observations, photos, little bits of video, drawings, and all sorts of things that I can then take into that page making process a little later down the line. Right now, all I want to do is just enjoy being here in the sunshine, listening to the birds and the sounds of the crickets, the grasshoppers, bees, butterflies and moths flying past. All of these special little moments that will soon make it into my main nature journal. It's getting really hot here on the cliff top. I've been here for about 15-20 minutes doing my nature journaling. Been making a few lists of the species that I've seen so far as a bit of a reminder for when I come back to do the page later on. I'm working on the micro seasons for February. When the sun was hitting the sea, I really wanted to paint this beautiful scene. I started out by doing the sea, using lots and lots of water, and it's a mixture of a kind of Payne's grey and a little bit of ultramarine in here, using once again this studio set by Inktense. I'm also adding in quite a bit of white because I want this kind of chalky, soft, pastel-y kind of cast to the sky. I'm using lots of water in this. I'm keeping the page really quite wet and continually adding more water and trying to balance between water and pigment. The thing with Inktense is that it will stain the paper if it dries, so I needed to keep it wet to keep a kind of smooth surface here rather than having areas of dark pigment. A spot of bright yellow here where the clouds are parting and the sunbeam is breaking through. To emphasise this sunbeam, I wanted to add some iridescence, so I'm using these Scrim watercolours again. A really lovely shimmering white here. It kind of comes out a little bit of a sort of silver colour, and I'm just painting that over the area of the sea that I've left white, the colour of the paper, specifically for this purpose. So it's going to look very bright, very white, and also shimmery too. I'm just touching a little bit into the clouds here. And now I'm adding in lots and lots of layers of Payne's grey and pink. I haven't got much pigment on the brush, it's mostly water. So what I'm doing is pulling the brush up towards the top of the page, just laying down a very soft little layer of that pigment. And over time those build up and up and up. See how much water there is in my palette right here? I kept on bouncing around between the sea and the sky. As soon as I got fed up of doing one area, I'd let that dry and go elsewhere. In a few places I did put on quite a lot more strength of colour. I wanted to, at this point, start to create some dynamism, some contrast in the painting. So while I've got that kind of subtle layer on the top, I'm dabbing on some much stronger pigment, not so much water mixed in. But you see how I'm still dragging the brush up and spreading that pigment around. So what I've just dropped on, I'm spreading it around with my brush. And that will blend it quite softly into the layer below. Sometimes it's worth outlining the edges of these sections. It's kind of, this is an area of cloud here. So I'm looking at my reference image and really overemphasizing on what was actually a very low contrast day. It's quite often about building some extra excitement into a scene like this, really emphasizing that line coming down on the sunbeam from the sky. I actually realised at this time that I'd put the line just a tad too straight, and it actually looks better in the composition if it's not straight down and is coming down, hitting the sea at a bit of an angle. So I corrected that by adding in some much darker Payne's grey, giving the scene a slightly stormier look than I'd originally anticipated, but I had to correct my error with the sunbeam to make this painting really work. Now here I'm adding in a little bit more highlight. So over the top of that shimmery paint, I'm using a 07 white gel pen and just trying to touch in some little areas of highlight. And this is the finished painting, so I was quite happy with how this one turned out in the end. Here it is in a garden at the beginning of June, still looking back at February, whilst the garden is coming to life outside and around me, including this fledgling robin in the garden, and this family of 4 baby moorhens down at the pond near my house. Just above the moorhen family, the sand martins have moved into the wall and are feeding their young, which are almost ready to fledge. I'm thinking about birds again for my next page, and remembering this special moment with the skylark. I can't believe it. I was actually right. Because the skylark was actually so high up and quite difficult to see, I used this reference image from Pixabay. I quite often go to Pixabay to get reference images if I was unable to get them myself. I did this drawing with this Derwent line maker in graphite. I've mainly been using this Pan Studio set for my work in this journal so far, but the blues aren't quite right in here for the sky that I'm going for. I need a kind of really soft, light blue that's quite difficult to mix without it kind of getting a kind of chalky white going through it, just as you saw before. So I chose this Malibu pencil, and I'm going to use the Derwent Inktense pencil here instead to get my pigment for the sky. So I scribbled it out as you saw there on that piece of paper, and then used this great big water brush to try and get a really smooth version of a single colour in that sky. You see how I'm using it here? Picking up from my palette paper, and while this page is really wet, blending more and more pigment into this page. I'm trying to avoid any streaks. As you can see, there was a bit of streaking here on the left side, but because of what I'm planning to do with the decoration on the page, it won't matter too much in the end. With the sky done, I've gone back to the Studio Pan set again. I'm using a water brush at the moment because I was visiting my parents' house. I was looking after their dog. I didn't want to be fiddling around with brushes when I could just have a portable setup. So I was using the water brush that day. First off, as you saw there, I put on all the darks and I wanted to get all of the dark areas in and then lay over with the lighter colours, just as you can see. It kind of builds up very slowly through translucent layers. This is the Merlin app. So I've taken the waveform, and you just click on the song and you can listen to the song of a bird. I've taken that waveform, and what I'm doing is I'm just drawing it off of the screen. I'm letting it play a little bit and then copying the waveform. But quite importantly here, I want it to be backwards. So it looks, you're reading it forwards this way on the screen, and then I'm reversing that when I'm doing my drawing. So it's as if the song is emerging from the bird's beak and then swirling down to earth. I'm once again using the Scrim watercolours to get a kind of shimmering song. I always think that the skylark has this incredible iridescent song, almost incandescent, shimmering, and I wanted to show that using a shimmering metallic watercolour here. So I'm just using a very fine water brush and I'm painting over the top of my drawn lines and trying to make sure they're completely covered up. This is kind of the final effect here. Of course, the first thing I wanted to do was take my skylark outside and let it soar again in the skies. Now we're thinking back to the end of February when I went to go and feed the turnstones down at St Ives when I was on holiday. These are remarkable, lovely little birds and I really enjoy hand feeding them. Sorry about this phone footage because I was on holiday and I was down feeding the birds. I had to get my partner to film it on his phone. But what I want to do here is recreate this little scene here. You can just see my little clip set up there, how I am now pinning my journal pages open. The challenge with this scene was to try and display two different types of perspective, or two different angles of perspective in the same painting. So the first clip that you saw there was the turnstones swooping off the wall and down onto the rocks below, and I wanted to include this. But I also wanted to include them being kind of down at my feet. And so what I did was I kind of blended across the two different pages these two different ways of looking at the scene. And then as it comes down the centre line of the page, the line of the path warps and it connects these two different perspectives together, which was really good fun. It's a pretty traditional painting, this one. I'm just using the Studio Pan set and I'm just kind of painting as I normally would do. I've been doing a lot of experimenting this year, as you would have seen in the previous videos for this project. But this one was not really so experimental, it's just a bit of painting. I'm using a mixture of burnt umber, or I think it's natural brown actually, in the pan set, mixed together with Payne's Grey, and then pushing and pulling between the bluish Payne's Grey colour and the brown to get the different shades on the turnstones. I also had to include this pigeon because it kept on trying to get the food out of my hand when I was feeding the turnstones, which is quite funny, and we kept on trying to stop it from getting close, but it was much more crafty and much less shy than the turnstones. Right here I'm on the other page now and I'm just using quite strong colour of Payne's Grey and I'm painting in the gaps between the rocks. I kind of wanted this painting to be relatively low contrast. I don't want there to be lots of black in here. So I'm using a soft blue and brown as the main component of the palette on both of these pages, adding in a little bit of green and yellow to get a bit of seaweediness to these rocks, if that is a word. And yeah, I just don't want it to be too strong on the contrast. Sometimes I really like soft pages that are just kind of almost a bit whimsical in their style. And that's all I've got to share with you this week. I really hope that you've got some tips from this and found it useful. I'm going to be catching up through this journal for most of the next few months, so I'm going to keep on reporting back on the pages. But before you go, I thought I'd show you through the journal so far. As you can see from the painted pages, I've still got quite a way to go through this book before completing the project. I'm going to tell you the names of each of the micro-seasons that I've created. This is We Emerge from the Darkness into the Light. This one is The Birch Woodland Recedes Indefinitely. This here, with the paper overlaying it, is the reeds glow orange at sunset. This one, the tree creeper climbs. And now new growth on the ground. The lapwings flock in lifting mist. Robins posture and pair, with beautiful gold leaf in the background here. The first sun of the year, a celandine flower, and trudging down muddy paths. Gorse flares the landscape yellow, and this was made with gorse flowers. Rabbit feeds with blackbird. Sunbeams touch the sea. The first skylark sings, and then finally so far, the turnstones scurry and gather. If you'd like to read the descriptions that go with all of these pages, you can find that on Substack and the blog on my website, alexboonart.com/blog. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to follow me through the rest of this project. I'll see you next time.